Thank you, Anthony. Great reporting as always. And go to lawandcrime.com to learn more about the top crime stories of the day and other stories that are trending right now. But I want to talk about that 32-year-old cold case. And who better to talk to me about the law and these cold cases that keep coming up than our very own Aaron Keller.
Jesse Weber, it's been far too long since we have sat across the round table.
It has. It has.
I feel like we live the same life, but just at different ends of the clock.
I look in the mirror and sometimes I say, Aaron? But no,
I don't think that happens. Our age is not very different, but our hair is just too far for comparison.
Don't tell anyone. All right, let's talk about this April Tinsley case. Now, we keep seeing this happening. We saw the Golden State Killer, the Timothy Coggins case, which we covered here on Law and Crime. Why are all of these cold cases coming up right now?
Look, it's the science progressing. It's DNA. I mean, look, there's another case I was following in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, I think it was, where, look, last week they released a composite sketch of the presumed killer based on DNA the killer left behind at the scene. They can plug your DNA into a computer program and figure out what your face looks like now, and then try to show that to people to try to get a comparison and see if people recognize other people. So as science progresses, that just tightens the noose on these old cold cases.
So you think that this is just the start? We'll probably see some more down the pipeline. But I have to ask, I'm not a scientist by any stretch of the imagination. Doesn't some of this evidence go bad, or is it still reliable all these years later? I mean, this guy's going to be brought up on charges. He's going to go to court.
When it comes to DNA, it depends on how it's preserved, how well it's preserved, et cetera, et cetera. So in many states, evidence is collected as far back 1980s, early 1980s. They kept it in cold storage under the presumption that someday some technology may allow that evidence to be tested, and then lo and behold, that's exactly what's happening. The Golden State Killer, perfect example.
Pretty remarkable that can happen. But let me ask you the $32 million question. What has this man, John Dean Miller, what has he been doing for the last 32 years? How come we never had an answer to April Tinsley's murder until now?
Good question. Laying low, apparently not allegedly committing any other crimes, flying under the radar, thinking that he got away with it, all of the above, something like that.
Okay, but he confessed just now, right? He kind of confessed when police confronted him, and he said that he knew exactly why they came to see him. Just because he confessed, though, doesn't mean he's necessarily going to be found guilty, right? He's going to lawyer up, you presumably. And just because a defendant confesses to police doesn't mean it's a slam dunk case.
Well, look, I mean, the defense is always going to challenge the confession, and we see that in cases time and time again. Was there some kind of, issue with the way the confession was taken? Was it unconstitutional? Was it coercive, etc.? They're going to look at that. They're going to try to figure out whether or not this sticks.
Well, let's see. Maybe we'll be able to cover this case here on Law and Crime, and we'll always update you about these stories as well. But I want to switch gears right now because we just got an update. We are live right now in the James Colley case out of Florida. The defense is beginning their case, and guess what? That is their first witness. Let's go live. So we're hearing all the text message conversations between Amanda Colley and the defendant James Colley, but how does this work for the defense? Again, I'm here with Aaron Keller. So I'm getting the flavor of they're trying to say, listen, they had a pretty good relationship for being divorced. He loved her. She seemed to love him. But she was the one who brought this Lamar Dobberly figure into the equation. And she said, look, he's just a friend. He's just a friend. But what is the defense trying to go at here?
Blame the victim, perhaps? I mean, these text messages just reek of so many of the messages we see in so many of these cases. It sounds like a degenerating relationship. Look, both of them had moved on to other partners, and yet there's this antagonism between the two. And it sounds like, yeah, the defense is trying to say, okay, she was saying things to him that set him off.
Right, so she says he's just a friend, but then we know he received that shirtless picture of Lamar cutting the grass, and that set him off.
From the friend, the neighbor, whatnot, who seemed to be prodding at this situation, perhaps to his regret at this point. But yeah, I mean, I think that it may be almost a heat of passion defense.
Right, and maybe that's what they're going for. We know that they dropped the Ambien defense, so we'll see where else they're going to go. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to go live right back into that courtroom. Stay tuned. One of the great things about what we do here is we always try to analyze the strategy, and here we're trying to analyze what the defense's strategy is. Again, I'm here with our very own Aaron Keller. So what's the strategy here by bringing on his attorney and talking about what the defendant's demeanor was like on the morning of the shooting?
So it sounds like they're trying to paint this defendant as someone who was a completely normal guy for all intents and purposes leading up to the point of the attack. It sounds like they're trying to go, again, what I said before, that something happened and he snapped, that this was more of a heat of passion crime than it was something premeditated. They may be trying to attack that premeditation element or perhaps try to drive a bit of a wedge into the intent element that's necessary for proving the crime.
I think you're right, considering the fact they conceded the fact that their client engaged in the shooting. That was when a defense team changes strategy midway through the trial, their first strategy was, yes, he committed these awful crimes, but why did he do it? Well, he did it because of prescription medication. Well, he did it not really because of, let's forget about the prescription medication.
Now it's because he snapped.
Yeah, so it's hard. Does the jury stay with that?
Well, my guess would be no, because I think that premeditation can be formed in an instant, and that's probably where they're going to be reminded by the prosecution to go. Well,
let's see. Now it's moving into the family. This is James Colley's sister. Let's go live. So that's Rhonda Colley Boatwright, James Colley's sister. Love that last name. It's great. But she's talking about a lot of different things. She's talking about that she was a go-between when her brother and Amanda would have fights. But really, we're learning about the guns that were left in her car. Again, I'm here with Aaron Keller. So is this her fault that he took?
I'm trying to figure that out. I mean, so what that she left guns in her car?
She's like, I didn't know that anybody was going to be driving my car. Apparently, she was out of town when the shooting took place. But what are we supposed to get from this? Why is the defense and what's going on
Again, I
here?
think they're going at this defendant snapped, and part of the reason he snapped is because something set him off, and he realized there were guns in the car, and bam, he put two and two together and used them. Split-second decision, no premeditation. I think that's what they're trying to prove.
In other words, he didn't go out to a store, buy some guns, and then went there. They were there. They were available to him in that car. Okay, let's see where it goes. Interesting day so far. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. We'll be live. That's Rhonda Colley Boatwright being grilled under cross-examination about what guns were in her car. Was she entirely sure? Was she giving one answer today that was different than when she told investigators? Let's bring on the great Aaron Keller to talk about this. So if she's being portrayed as being a liar in order to protect her brother, I'm not sure I get the connection here.
I'm still trying to figure out exactly where they're going with this, other than to try to say that she allowed him access to these weapons. And why would someone allow a person who may be violent, may be plotting something, access to a bunch of weapons? In other words, she didn't have any concern or fear with leaving these weapons in the vehicle while she went away. Perhaps that's the link.
That's a really great point, because we heard the defense say in their opening statement, he didn't appear to be a threat. And you know who didn't think he was a threat? Amanda Colley didn't think that he was a threat. If she did, wouldn't let her kids near him. So Aaron makes a very good point. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned. That was Tammy Folsom. She stayed at James Colley's sister's house talking about her interactions with the defendant right around the time of the shooting. Nothing seemed to be out of the ordinary. Again, Aaron, you're saying what you've said is that this shows that he wasn't planning a murder, but that sudden spark of rage happened. Maybe when he saw, maybe when he got that adverse ruling in court, maybe when he saw the shirtless photo of Lamar Dobberly outside cutting his ex-wife's grass, but something set him off, but it wasn't a premeditated killing.
That seems to be possibly where the defense is going, but I don't think I even believe that theory if that's where they're trying to go, because premeditation can be formed very quickly. It can be formed a split second before a crime is committed, and you know, look, that could be where they're trying to go. It's weak, but I can't really think of how else this is relevant other than to try to say this guy was mostly a normal guy.
Well, mostly a normal guy that went on a apparent shooting rampage. Let's go. This is the other sister of James Colley. We saw one of his sisters testify earlier. So let's go live. You can see already this is probably going to be some emotional testimony. Let's go live. Well, 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 the defense is just going through witness after witness, and we believe closing arguments will happen later on in this afternoon. So let's talk with Aaron Keller real quick before they bring on the next witness. What would you expect from the defense's we just had an update. The defense has rested. Okay.
That was a machine gun fire
that
of
was
quick
really,
witnesses there.
Really quick. So what's the defense going to wrap this all up in their closing argument?
I'm waiting to see. I think they might try to attack premeditation. They might try to attack intent. They might try to say this was some kind of a crime of passion. They may try to say that the victim was egging on the defendant and that he snapped. Is it excusable? Probably not. Is it believable? I don't think it's likely, but this is a strong case for the state. You've got video of the two survivors fleeing the scene on foot. What more can the state ask for?
But again, the jury are comprised, they're human beings. They're sitting there listening to this. First, they were told by the defense that this is a result of prescription medication, Ambien. Then they're told, okay, we're not going to focus on that anymore. Now they're being told that, Amanda egged him on. But if you probably find him guilty, we'll probably bring in that evidence later on about the prescription medication. How much can they take?
Look, at this point, it may just be the defense trying to prevent a death penalty punishment here. It may be looking for that one juror who feels sorry for the guy, who says, he did the wrong thing, but we shouldn't send him to death row. That may be what they're going for here.
And what do you think the jury's thinking about the fact that James Colley, when the medical examiner was on the stand talking about all the injuries that these victims sustained, he had his face in his hands, his face on the table. He couldn't even listen or hear to what was being said.
It's just another bizarre piece of this puzzle here. I mean, is it because he felt remorse? Is it because he didn't want to relive it? Is it because he was doing this almost with an out-of-body, way of going about the deeds? Is it because he snapped and he doesn't want to face the effects of the snap? Why? Is it because his attorney told him to? Who knows?
Well, that could be a possibility too. See, when I saw that, I was like, here's a mentally unstable guy. That Ambien defense really works. Maybe he really is on a bunch of prescription medication, and maybe that's really what the cause is. But things took a really different turn yesterday, and we have honestly no clue about which way it's going to go, including what the defense's closing argument will be. So we're going to wait and see. We're going to wait and see. We will take a quick break, but when we come back, there's a lot more to talk about in the James Colley case. Stay tuned.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released an age progression video of a missing baby snatched from his crib in Colorado 32 years ago. Christopher Abeta of Colorado Springs was abducted on July 15, 1986, and authorities haven't been able to crack the case since. Anyone with information should contact the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children or the Colorado Springs Police Department. Authorities in Georgia released video of 4 suspects attacking and robbing a waitress in an Applebee's in Wilkinson County. 2 of the women, 38-year-old Lysandra Boyd and 30-year-old Katera Boyd, were arrested and charged with aggravated assault and robbery for their role in the attack. The waitress was beaten and stabbed by the attackers after reportedly brushing against one of the woman's legs by accident. 2 of the suspects, Lakeisha and Demetrius Boyd, are still at large. Authorities say they were able to solve the 30-year-old cold case murder of an 8-year-old girl in Fort Wayne, Indiana, thanks to DNA evidence. 59-year-old John D. Miller was arrested in connection with the rape and murder of April Tinsley, who was abducted on April 1, 1998, when she was walking home from her friend's house. Her body was discovered 3 days later in a ditch 20 miles north of her home. The killer's DNA was found on April's body, but authorities could not find a match. Miller was eventually linked to the murder when a DNA lab was able to link the sample found on April's body with his DNA, which authorities collected from Miller's trash. Miller eventually admitted to kidnapping, sexually assaulting, and killing April. He is currently being held on suspicion of murder, child molesting, and confinement. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law and Crime.
Thank you again, Anthony. Great reporting as always. And go to lawandcrime.com to follow some more of the top stories of the day. But I want to talk about April Tinsley right now. Another cold case that is coming out. This keeps happening. We saw the Golden State Killer. We covered the Timothy Coggins case here on Law and Crime. And now this one. Let me bring back in my very special guest, a familiar face here on the program, Aaron Keller. Aaron, great to see you again. So this one is interesting because they were able to get his DNA from trash. His trash. How is that even possible? I know that there was one, I don't remember which case, I'm getting confused, where they were able to get someone's DNA off of a napkin. So anytime a suspect leaves something, it can be used against them?
Well, yeah, I mean, look, they narrowed it down to this guy, okay, because they had DNA from the scene of this death years and years and years ago. And then they had some other DNA from, apparently he was like discarding used condoms and taunting other people, as bizarre as that sounds. It's bizarre how frequently these accused killers just discard their DNA in such ways. They had all of that, and then they started to narrow in on this guy. But look, the bottom line is the law predicates, or the law dictates the conclusion that when you discard something and it's beyond the curtilage of your home, that's the legal term, beyond, you know, some sort of boundary around your protected zone in your home. If you throw trash out on the curb, the police can take it because you're giving it up. And if there's some DNA in there, yeah, they can take it, they can test it.
Interesting. Also, good use of the word curtilage. I never get to hear that ever, so that was a good use of the word.
Got to be up on the vocab, Jesse. I mean, come on.
So, but here's the question, though. I have a feeling this guy almost wanted to get caught. When investigators came to him, police came, he knew immediately why they were there, and he basically confessed. Why did it take him 32 years? Why did it take 32 years to finally get this guy as a suspect?
I mean, it's sort of hard to see inside this guy's head, but as to why he confessed, maybe he just was sort of playing this game with the police. Aha, I wonder how long I can get along with this. But once they finally showed up, he's just like, yep, you got me. Took you all this time, but you finally got me. I don't know. Maybe that's what was going on.
But it's not necessarily a guilty verdict, right? Just because someone confesses and just because you have this DNA, I could think about holes that you might be able to poke even in this DNA evidence or even in his confession, right? So it's not a slam dunk.
Yeah, I mean, a confession isn't a guilty plea. Okay, the two are different. Confessions can be coerced, they can be born of some other mechanism, and courts do sometimes flip them. It's rare, but it does happen from time to time.
Do you think that this is the start of more of these cases coming down the pipeline? I don't know if there's cases that you have been following in your career where you know there hasn't been a suspect, it's cold cases, and then all of a sudden, maybe with the advance of technology, and I don't even know what the advance of technology was, it took 32 years, but there's obviously things we have today that there weren't there back then. Is there cases that you think might be coming down the pipeline or things that you see where this is just the start of it? We're going to see more people coming into custody.
Look, I mean, it's a known fact that law tends to follow science, tends to follow invention. So the more new things are invented, the more we're going to see new ways to try to solve crimes. Here we know from this case that a detective commissioned an outside lab. We don't know all of the details yet. Apparently, this lab had some kind of test or could do something that linked this defendant to the DNA that was left behind at multiple crime scenes. And as we continue to invent new ways to amplify DNA, to take tiny, tiny, minute samples and then sort of blow them up so they can be analyzed, the more, yes, we're probably going to see cases like this finally come to court.
And not to speculate, but when you get a defendant, a new suspect, and you have him in custody, and now you know he's part of this crime, isn't it a situation where maybe he was implicated in other crimes and we didn't know about it until now? So we have these new people who are getting brought into custody. Maybe it'll shed light on other cases that they've been involved in.
It's possible, but one has to wonder how complete these various DNA banks are in various states. If a state has a very good DNA bank, if things are being properly uploaded into the National DNA Registry, into CODIS, then yeah, I mean, it's possible you could upload somebody's DNA into the system and bam, it matches any number of crimes. It's possible. That's why they keep everything in a database.
Right. Well, we'll have to see which way it goes. There's going to be, I have a feeling that this is just the start. We had the Golden State, Timothy Coggins, it keeps coming forward, and it's a good thing. We want these cold cases solved. We want some justice brought to the family. So we will update you if we know more about the April Tinsley case, and we'll always update you more on Law and Crime. But let's switch gears right now and go back to the James Colley case out of Florida. Now, what did we see today? The defense began their case, and we saw them bring out Rhonda Colley Boatwright. I can't get enough of that name. I love that. Rhonda Colley Boatwright. She is James Colley's sister, somebody that knew the defendant very well. He was apparently, I believe, living with her at the time of the shooting. So what better witness to bring out by the defense than a family member that knew him so well? Let's play you some of her testimony right now. So the defense brought out James Colley's sister. We're trying to understand what their strategy is. Let's bring back on Aaron Keller. Aaron, you mentioned it earlier that it's almost like they're blaming the victim here, Amanda Colley, and saying she wasn't such a great mother. And you know what? She didn't think anything was wrong with James Colley. If so, she should have taken the kids away. Is that what you're seeing?
It's a little piece of what I'm seeing, and it's a bizarre strategy because juries tend not to like this when victims are blamed unless the victim literally was some kind of aggressor in the situation, like a physical aggressor.
Which she wasn't.
And again, I think that the defense is taking the long view of this. They're trying to turn around and say, you know, okay, we need to try to save this guy's life even if he's convicted, and maybe one juror will think that this guy was egged on by that victim and snapped, and it may be enough to save him from a death sentence.
Think it's possible?
Well, they hope it's possible. I think it's unlikely.
Okay, well, we'll have to see. So they're in a break right now. We are going to take a break ourselves. We have a lot more to cover right after this. Stay tuned. A lot of guns in an open car. Let's talk about it with Aaron Keller. So a bunch of guns are in that car. Is she partly to blame for what happened?
I don't think there's any true way you can blame her for the crime of murder just because she left a gun in her vehicle. I mean, unless there's some other law in Florida that says that she wasn't supposed to keep them there. Okay, and we don't know that. I haven't dug that far into it. But this just seems to be arm flailing. To me, at least.
You mean for the defense?
Yeah.
They're trying to blame someone, right? Who can we blame?
It's everyone's fault other than the defendant.
Or if it is his fault, well, we know that he's the one who fired the weapons, but maybe someone pressured him into doing it, or maybe someone gave him the opportunity to do it. And we keep hearing this idea that blame the victim. Let's blame Amanda Colley. She was the one who teased him with her lover, Lamar Dobberly. She had this guy who she said was just a friend, was cleaning the grass shirtless, and he blames her for
cleaning the grass.
Cutting the grass. Cutting the grass, you know what I mean. And so keep blaming the victim. But when we were talking in the break, the court made it a point to say, you can't blame the victim as much as you would like, right?
Yeah, look, okay, so I'm reading some of the pretrial motions that were filed because they oftentimes hold the keys to these questions that we sit around here and ask. And in Florida, many of them are available pretty easily. So, look, there was a motion in limine, which is an evidentiary motion before trial to try to either get something in or to keep something out. Okay, rather than lodge an objection in the heat of a trial, attorneys file these motions just to try to get an issue settled before they come into trial. One of them was filed by the state, and it says, and I'm reading from it, many of these characterizations from the defendant include referring to Amanda Colley as a, quote, bad wife, as a, quote, uncaring mother who was, quote, cheating on me, while conversely portraying himself, that is the defendant, as a good guy, devoted father who was fighting to save our marriage, among other descriptions. So this is one of the tactics the defense tried to bring into things pretty early on here, and the state fought hard against it and said, wait a minute, you can't bring all this stuff in here. It is self-serving hearsay.
No. Really?
That's how the state tried to fight back against it.
But that's what it seems like they're doing here. They're bringing in these text message conversations between him and Amanda. They're showing these people to say, hey, you know what? He was a good father. She was a bad mother. She was with this other guy. That's what they seem to be doing right now.
Well, this is how the state tried to fight against it. Apparently, the state wasn't completely successful in doing so, but that's how the state tried to fight against this stuff.
Okay, well, as we talk about the defense team's strategy and who they're trying to blame for why this ultimately happened, let's go back to his sister, Rhonda Colley. Rhonda Colley. And she said, so she had all these guns in her car. She went off to Italy. When she was away, the shooting took place. Well, under cross-examination, The state really wasn't having this. They were trying to catch her up in a lie. Let's hear a little bit more as they grilled her. That was the crux of the argument right there. The premeditation, the guns in the car. Let's talk with Aaron Keller about it. Sorry, Aaron. So, again, what the theory is there is that if the guns were in her car, then it can't really be premeditation because it's not like he went out somewhere else and got the guns. It was there for him to get, and he burst out into rage. Am I understanding that correctly?
It would help support a snap decision defense, but I think what's important here is some other key elements of the defense that the defense tried to put on really kind of fell apart it appears in the pretrial motion stage. They were trying to say that these statements from the victim, okay, egging on the defendant, being a bad mother, led to the prescription use, which then led to the crime. That was the original defense.
Okay, well, that was the original one. They've been switching things up a lot during this case.
Grinding gears.
Grinding gears. We have more after this short break. So that was the prosecution's rebuttal witness trying to show how James Colley's sister was lying to investigators. Now, Aaron, I'm here with Aaron Keller. Is that what you're getting? Let's bring out this witness and show, hey, listen, don't believe what this sister's saying about the guns in the car. She's a liar. She didn't tell the truth when she spoke to investigators. She's saying something different now. But the underlying aspect of it about how many guns were in the car and which guns, why does this matter?
I'm trying to figure that out as well because, look, I mean, the bottom line is that this defendant used them to shoot people, okay, and his defense basically admitted as much during the opening statement. So what's this got to do with premeditation? It looks to me like he's charged under the premeditated design part of Florida's murder statute. So unless the defense is trying to attack that particular element, I'm trying to figure out how the guns are going to play into this and exactly how they're going to weave this together.
If you were delivering the closing argument, Aaron, you had the opportunity, what would you say? What would the argument be?
Who's closing argument? The state's
for the defense.
The defense. Oh boy.
And I know we only have 30 seconds, but yeah.
I think the only place that they've got to go at this point, based on the evidence in court, is look that this was a snap decision. This was heat of the moment. This was not premeditated. Okay, I think that's really what they're trying to attack here.
And we'll see if they
ultimately do it. Very weak argument.
It is, but they're being left with this argument after they dropped the ambient defense. Aaron Keller, thank you so much for coming on. It was great to see you, and you're not hosting later today, though, right?
I am not, no,
okay, well,
unfortunately.
Well, make sure to catch Aaron when he hosts. He's a much better host than I am. Aaron, thank you so much.
No.
All right, everybody, here's what we're going to do. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, we're jumping back into this courtroom. We're going to cover the closing arguments and each aspect of this case out of Florida. More after this short break. Stay tuned. So if you had the James Colley trading cards, Lamar Dobberly would be one to get. He is a central character in this story. And I want to talk a little bit more about what he did on that day with my very special guest. I'm bringing him back, wouldn't let him leave the set.
Rumors of my demise have been exaggerated frequently.
Aaron, I couldn't let you go.
Court broke, and I said I'd stick around.
Exactly. So I don't know how to feel about Lamar Dobberly. He was the central character of the shooting. It seemed that James Colley went to find him, and he ran away. He said, as soon as I heard, I ran away. Now, I know there's people, if you look at the message boards, there's people who might say he's a coward. There's others who say if I was in that situation, I would do the exact same thing. I'm curious about your perspective about what this man did that day.
I'm just glad that I'm ultimately not sitting in the throne of judgment on him. I mean, you know, I could see an argument for both sides. I try not to make decisions that I don't have to make. I guess the question is, what does his testimony actually bring into this case? Does it put him on the stand? Does it help the defense? Because the defense can put this guy in front of the jury and say, look, this is the guy who was driving a wedge between the defendant and the victim. Is that going to help the defense? Or does it help the state to just say, he comes across like a reasonable guy. He was helping the victim move on from a failed marriage.
The jurors are human beings, and I don't know the makeup of them in terms of what kind of relationships they have. But when you enter sex into the mix of this, okay, so the idea that this ex-wife was having a relationship with another man or a seeming relationship, do they hold on to that and say, I have a little bit of sympathy for the defendant right now. I can understand he was losing his family, he was maybe losing his children, he still loved Amanda, and then all of a sudden she has this other guy. Or they say, wait a sec, that doesn't excuse what he did. How do you think they think about it?
I mean, look, I mean, there's a backstory to this, obviously. You know, I mean, do they put him on the stand? Does the jury look at the guy and say, man, that guy's a sleazeball. He shouldn't be messing around with this woman. He shouldn't be involved in things like this. There's some pretrial motion activity that suggests that the state really wanted to limit questions of that witness about exactly how many affairs he's been involved with, because apparently at one point the defense was trying to needle him about that. Interesting, but does it really get us to whether or not this defendant committed premeditated murder or whether or not he committed felony murder? I'm not sure that this guy's testimony is really relevant beyond being able to say shots were fired in that house and I ran.
Well, let's judge for ourselves. We're going to play you now when Lamar Dobberly was cross-examined by the defense, and this was a good opportunity, good opportunity for them to say who this guy really is. Take a look. That was the pivotal testimony of Lamar Dobberly, a key witness in this case. But as we wait for the closing arguments, I want to bring on Aaron Keller real quick to ask some of the quick ways that they might be able to find James Colley guilty of first-degree murder.
So in Florida, the murder statute involves premeditated killing. Okay, that could get them to the top charge. And it also includes felony murder. And he's charged under a mechanism that would basically allow them to go at this top count through a couple different ways. It could be premeditation. It could be combined with the aggravated stalking, a death involving that, or it could be combined with the burglary charge. In other words, a death during a burglary.
In other words, there's a lot of ways they could find him guilty of first-degree murder, and that is what the judge is instructing the jury right now. A lot to cover. We'll cover more right after this. Stay tuned here on Law and Crime. Okay, so in a case about premeditated murder, listening to the conversation that the defendant had with his father shortly before the shooting, how great is that for the prosecution? Not so good for the defense. Let's bring back on Aaron Keller. So the fact that he is having this conversation with his father, and he's talking about, I can't do this anymore, and how angry he is at the victim, Amanda Colley. Usually, for whole other reasons, you don't get to hear that testimony in court. There's some evidentiary rules, but here we're getting to hear it. This is not good for the defense unless they flip it. Is there a way they might be able to flip it?
I'd be struggling to figure out exactly how they'd be able to do it successfully, other than that it perhaps would have been part of the original defense. Look, this guy was taking, 7 or 8 different prescriptions and whatnot. They were going to try to say that all of those added together, along with the psychological pressure from what was going on with the court hearing, what was going on with this animosity with the former wife moving on with a new lover. They were going to try to argue that all of that added together to result in a toxic, emotional, and psychological cocktail, which drove this defendant's acts. It seems like they're going to have a hard time making that out, though. And we know that they sort of abandoned this pharmaceutical defense.
Yes, they abandoned it, and that cocktail that you explained, they're no longer going with that, but this idea that he was mentally unstable, or let's say he was stable, and then all of a sudden he just blew up, maybe that's the way they'll go, Aaron. We're going to have to wait and see what the closing arguments will entail. That's what we're waiting for. I'm looking at the courtroom feed. I'm keeping a very careful eye on it, and as soon as we have it, we'll make sure to go to it. In the meantime, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back in a little bit. So again, the judge is still giving jury instructions, so as soon as it changes, we'll make sure to go to it, maybe after this short break. And there's still a lot more to talk about in this case. Now, we will take a break. Stay tuned. It's really never good to have all that captured in a text message for a jury to see. So let's talk a little bit more about it with Aaron Keller. These back and forth conversations where he lists her as BITCH in his phone, not so good for a jury to see that.
No, because it looks like this relationship was disintegrating and that the animosity was ramping up long before the shots were fired. Premeditation for the state, a hard argument to refute from the defense. Unless the defense is trying to somehow say that this built up and then he snapped, but that seems like sort of a weird way to sort of flip the script.
Well, there's people who, I mean, everybody was an ex. It's not it's a contentious relationship. You know what I mean? There's a problem there. Clearly, there's a problem there. So how much of it is, and we only have about 20 seconds.
It seems like the defense is saying that she needled him, then he snapped. They're trying to get out of that premeditation element. That's my guess.
Well, it may work. We'll have to see. Now, Aaron, I am officially signing you off.
You are telling me I cannot come back.
You cannot be here. We have a new guest that's coming here, Misty Maris, who's excellent. And we also have a new host who's coming here, Carissa Kranz. She will be coming in. So I will be signing off, and she will guide you through the next chapter of this case, including the closing arguments by both the state and the defense. We'll take a quick break. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.